I counted the shell casings on the ground before the paramedics got there. 23 of them scattered across the church parking lot like cigarette butts after a Saturday night. 23 shots fired at my brother's rehearsal dinner. And when I knelt beside him on that asphalt, when I pressed my hands against the hole in his chest and felt the blood coming too fast, too warm, he grabbed my collar and pulled me close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath from the party inside. "Nate," he whispered. It wasn't random. Then he was gone. "My name is Nathan Cole. I'm 31 years old. I did 6 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment, 2 deployments to Syria, 1 to Mali, and a commendation I keep in a shoebox because putting it on the wall felt like bragging. I got out 3 years ago, came home to Clarkstown, Ohio, took a job doing security consulting for a logistics firm, and tried to learn how to be a person again instead of a weapon." My brother Drew was 28. He was a high school history teacher. He coached JV baseball on the side. He was supposed to get married on Saturday. He didn't make it to Thursday night. The call came at 9:47 p.m. I was 20 minutes away at my apartment watching game film from Drew's team because he'd asked me to look at their pitcher's mechanics. Somewhere in the background of my Tuesday night, my brother was bleeding out in a church parking lot in Clarkstown while his fiancée screamed and the other guests scattered into the dark. I drove 90 the whole way. I knew before I got there. You just know. When I pulled up, there were 4 police cruisers and an ambulance with its back door still open. The ambulance wasn't going anywhere. That told me everything. A uniform tried to stop me at the tape. I didn't stop, he didn't push it. I must have looked like exactly what I was, someone who'd seen worse than this and was barely holding it together. Drew was already covered when I reached him. I dropped to one knee anyway. Put my hand on the sheet where his shoulder would be. Said his name once. Then I stood up and I started counting shell casings. 23. The lead detective on scene was a woman named Patricia Hollis. She had tired eyes and a green jacket with a coffee stain on the lapel, and she looked at me the way cops look at military guys. Half respect, half suspicion, like they're waiting to see which version of us shows up. "You're the brother," she said. "Nathan Cole, Ranger Regiment, separated 3 years ago." She wrote something down. "We're treating this as a drive-by. Possible gang activity. Your brother. Did he have any known associations with?" "No." "You sound certain." "I know my brother." She nodded slowly. "Do you know of anyone who'd want to target the venue? The family?" I thought about what Drew had said. It wasn't random. I didn't tell Hollis that yet. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed to understand it myself first. I told her I'd be in touch. I drove to the hospital to find Claire. Claire was Drew's fiancée. She was 26, a pediatric nurse, and the kind of person who remembered everyone's coffee order and sent birthday cards on time. When I found her in the waiting room, she was sitting completely still with her hands folded in her lap, not crying, just staring at the floor the way people do when their brain refuses to process what just happened. I sat down next to her. Didn't say anything for a while. "He pushed me down," she finally said. "When the shooting started, he covered me with his body and pushed me between 2 cars. That's how he got hit." I closed my eyes for a second. That was Drew. That was exactly Drew. "He said something to me before it started," Claire whispered. "Before the shots. He'd been on his phone outside, and when he came back in, he looked pale, scared. I asked him what was wrong. He said he'd explain after the party. He said it was something to do with school." School. Drew taught at Clarkstown High. He'd been there 4 years. Did he say anything else? She shook her head. Then she stopped. "He said to call you if anything happened to him. He said not to call the police first, to call you." I drove home with the windows down even though it was 40 degrees. I needed the cold. Drew had been scared before the shooting started. He'd been on his phone. He'd known something was wrong. And he told his fiancée to call me, not 911, not his friends, me. His brother with the classified background and the shoebox full of commendations. He knew what I could do. The apartment felt different when I got back. I went into the spare room I used as an office, sat down at the desk, and turned on the lamp. I had a yellow legal pad. I wrote 2 things at the top, Drew's name. And then, it wasn't random. I drew a line under both. Then I started building a map. Drew's school was the obvious starting point. He taught AP History and Standard U.S. Government for 4 years. No disciplinary issues, no parent complaints that I knew of. He'd mentioned a few problem students over the years, the way all teachers do, but nothing that ever made me concerned. I pulled out my phone and called his department head, a man named Walt Feeney, who picked up on the 4th ring sounding like he'd been crying. Walt told me Drew had seemed distracted for the past 2 weeks. Quieter than usual. He'd asked to leave campus early twice. Unusual for Drew, who typically stayed late to coach or grade. Walt had assumed it was pre-wedding nerves. Did anything unusual happen at school recently? I asked. Walt paused. There was a situation about 3 weeks ago. A student came to Drew with something. Drew took it pretty seriously. He filed a formal report with administration. What kind of report? Something to do with the parking lot behind the gym. The student said they'd seen money changing hands between some older guys and a few students. Drew thought it looked like a drug transaction. He documented it, sent it to the assistant principal, copied the district office. And? The assistant principal told him it was probably nothing. Said the school had a good relationship with the neighborhood and they didn't want to create drama over something unsubstantiated. I recognized that logic. Same logic as always. Protect the reputation. Don't make noise. Don't call the police if you can avoid it. Who was the assistant principal? Brent Calloway, Walt said. He's been there about 2 years. Came in from the district office. Nice enough guy, but very political. I thanked Walt and hung up. I Googled Brent Calloway. School photo. Standard administrator smile. Vague bio. Before the school, he'd worked in the district's community outreach department. Before that, a stint at the county commissioner's office. The county commissioner's office. I wrote Calloway's name on the pad. The next morning, I drove by the school parking lot, then around behind the gym. It was a Thursday. The lot was empty at 6 a.m. I sat there for 10 minutes, just watching. The gym backed up to a chain-link fence, and beyond that fence was a narrow street that ran behind a strip mall. Easy access from outside. Easy to approach, easy to leave. I drove around to the strip mall, gas station, a payday loan place, a dry cleaner, and at the far end, a check cashing operation called Quick Funds. I parked and watched Quick Funds for 20 minutes. 3 people went in. 2 came out. The third didn't. On a hunch, I photographed the front of the building. The signage, the address. When I got home, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I called Tomas. Tomas was a guy I'd served with in Syria. He'd been intelligence, the kind of job with no official name and a very unofficial job description. He'd left the army the same year I did and gone private sector. Deep private sector. Cole, he answered. Thought you were done with the fun stuff. I need a favor. Business or personal? Personal. Someone killed my brother. Silence. Then, what do you need? I gave him the Quick Funds address and asked him to pull corporate registrations, ownership records, any financial links he could find. I gave him Calloway's name. I gave him the phone number Drew had called the night he died. I had pulled it from Claire's phone, the last outgoing call before the shooting. A number Drew had called 3 times that evening before someone finally answered. Tomas said he'd call me back. I drove to Claire's parents' house where she was staying. She was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her mother. When she saw me, her mother quietly left the room. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest, I said. Okay. Drew's in the last month, did he seem worried about money? Did he mention anything unusual about anyone he'd met? Anything about school beyond the normal complaints? She thought about it. He was stressed. But I thought it was the wedding. We were over budget on the venue, and he kept saying he'd figure it out. She hesitated. He did say something strange about 2 weeks ago. He said someone had approached him. He didn't say who. He said they'd offered him money to look the other way on something. I felt the back of my neck go cold. He turned it down. Obviously. He was furious. He said he wasn't that kind of person. Did he say what he was supposed to look the other way on? No. He just said it was related to the school, and that he was going to handle it the right way. He filed the report with Calloway. That was handling it the right way. And Calloway buried it. I went back to my apartment and sat with that for a while. Drew had seen something. He'd reported it. Someone had tried to pay him to stay quiet. He'd refused. He'd been killed 4 days before his wedding. It wasn't random. My phone rang. Tomas. Quick Funds, he said without preamble. Registered to a shell company called Meridian Consulting Group. Meridian has 7 LLCs under it, spread across 3 states, but the controlling interest runs back to a single guy. He paused. Name is Eddie Vargas. Got a sheet? Assault, extortion, 1 federal conspiracy charge that was plead down 6 years ago. He rents a crew out of Columbus, operates in smaller markets around Ohio. Your town is relatively new territory for them, past 18 months or so. What's the crew? Not a traditional gang. More like a franchise. They use legitimate fronts, check cashing, pawn shops, and they use those to launder money from drug distribution. But here's the thing, Cole. Vargas doesn't run the distribution himself. He contracts it out. The actual street-level operation in Clarkstown runs through a guy named Terrence Hooks. Local, has a prior for possession, currently on probation. I wrote both names down. One more thing, Tomas said. That number you gave me. The one your brother called 3 times. Yeah. It's a burner. Bought at a Walmart in Columbus 8 weeks ago. But I traced the tower pings. The night your brother was killed, that phone was active within 4 blocks of the church. I stared at the wall. They weren't just warned, I said. They were watching. Drew had called that number trying to reach someone, maybe trying to negotiate, maybe trying to warn someone, maybe trying to understand what was about to happen. And whoever held that phone had been outside the church the whole time, close enough to direct the hit. My brother had been executed, and someone had planned it carefully enough to have eyes on the venue. I drove to the school the next morning and asked to speak with Brent Calloway. His office was standard administrator issue. Motivational posters, a whiteboard with nothing on it, a desk with a single framed photo facing away from me. He stood when I entered, hand extended, practiced sympathy on his face. Mr. Cole, I am so sorry about your brother. Drew was a wonderful. He filed a report with you 3 weeks ago, I said, sitting down without shaking his hand, about suspicious activity in the lot behind the gym. Calloway sat slowly. I recall something of that nature, yes. We looked into it and determined there wasn't. Who did you talk to when you determined that? He blinked. I consulted with district leadership. Our protocol is, specifically, who? His face went very still. The practiced sympathy drained out of it and left something flatter underneath. I had a conversation with the district safety liaison. Name? I don't see how. My brother is dead, Mr. Calloway. I kept my voice even. Same voice I used when I needed a room to understand that the conversation was not going to go another direction. He filed a report with you. Someone tried to bribe him to stay quiet. He refused. He's dead. Now I'm sitting in your office asking you a question about who you talked to, and you're deciding whether to answer me. He looked at the door, looked back at me. Gary Phelan, he said quietly. Deputy Superintendent for Community and School Safety. I thanked him and left. That evening, Thomas sent me a file on Gary Phelan. 44 years old. Deputy Superintendent for 3 years. Prior to that, a decade in local politics. City Council, then a stint as aide to State Senator Alan Drummond. State Senator Alan Drummond, who was currently running for re-election and whose campaign had received over $80,000 in contributions from organizations I couldn't immediately identify. I forwarded everything to a secure email, and then I called my contact at the FBI field office in Columbus. Her name was Special Agent Diane Reeves. I'd worked adjacent to her team on one operation 3 years prior, never officially, but she knew what I was. She picked up on the first ring. Cole, I heard about your brother. I'm sorry. I need a meeting, not a social one. How soon? Tonight if you can. She could. We met at a diner off I-70 at 10 p.m. I laid it out. The shell company, Vargas, Hooks, the burner phone pinging 4 blocks from the church, Calloway and Phelan, the $80,000 in campaign contributions. Everything. The $80,000 in campaign contributions. Everything. She listened without interrupting, which is how I knew she was taking it seriously. Cole, she said when I finished, if Drummond is connected to this, you're talking about a sitting state senator. Campaign finance ties to a money laundering operation. Conspiracy in a murder. This isn't a local homicide case anymore. I know. I need everything you have. Every document, every screenshot, all of it. She looked at me hard. And I need you to stay away from Vargas and Hooks. Don't approach them. Don't surveil them. Don't go anywhere near the Quit Funds location. I need one thing first, I said. What? Drew's report. The one Calloway buried. I need to know if Phelan deleted it from the district server or just suppressed it. She thought for a moment. I can make a call to the district IT director, Saponev if needed. If it was deleted recently, there may be a backup. Most school districts use cloud archiving. They don't always know what gets saved. That's all I need, I said. Then it's yours. She called me back the next morning. The report was there, backed up to a cloud archive that Phelan apparently didn't know existed. It was time-stamped in Drew's name, detailed student names, dates, descriptions of the transactions he'd witnessed, a license plate he'd written down from one of the vehicles. The plate came back to a car registered to Terrence Hooks. That was the chain. Drew saw Hooks. Drew reported Hooks. Phelan told Calloway to bury it, presumably because Phelan was protecting the operation, presumably because the operation was connected back to Vargas, and Vargas's money flowed through channels that were financing, among other things, a state senator's re-election campaign. My brother figured out one link in a chain that went a lot higher than a strip mall in Clarkstown. When they couldn't buy his silence, they ended it another way. The next 3 weeks were the hardest I've experienced outside of a combat zone. Reeves moved fast, but the federal machine moves on its own schedule. Grand jury proceedings. Financial forensics. Coordinating with the Columbus PD. I had to hand everything over and step back, which felt like being asked to stand still while someone else finished a job I'd started. I went to Drew's apartment twice to check on things, water a plant Claire had asked me to keep alive. Each time I stood in his living room and looked at the stack of papers on his coffee table, ungraded quizzes, a permission slip for a field trip, a handwritten note from a student that said, "Thanks for not giving up on me, Mr. Sack." I had to remind myself that staying out of it now was how I kept all of that from being erased. They arrested Terrence Hooks first, pulled him out of a laundromat in East Clarkstown on a Tuesday morning. The news didn't make headlines, just a small item on the local station's website. Vargas went 3 days later. Federal agents at a property in Columbus, search warrants for 3 locations simultaneously. That one made the news. Phelan was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, which was bureaucratic language for "we know and we're building the case." Calloway cooperated. He'd apparently known about the connection between Phelan and the operation for months, but had convinced himself that as long as he just buried one report, he wasn't really involved. His attorney negotiated early. The last one was Drummond. Senator Alan Drummond, in a tailored charcoal suit, walked into the Statehouse on a Wednesday morning like he owned it, which he practically did. Reeves had waited until the financial forensics were airtight. When the agents approached him on the Statehouse steps, his face cycled through confusion, then indignation, then something that might have been relief. The way people sometimes look when a secret they've been keeping finally comes out into the open. He said into the nearest camera, "This is a politically motivated attack on my record of service to the people of Ohio." Reeves said, "Senator Drummond is charged with conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and public corruption." I watched it on my phone, standing in my apartment's parking lot at 7 a.m. with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. 23 shell casings. One for each shot they fired into that parking lot. Into my brother. Drew had been a teacher. He wasn't a whistleblower or an activist or a crusader. He was just a 28-year-old guy who saw something wrong and filed the appropriate paperwork because that was what you were supposed to do. He had no idea the paperwork would land in the hands of someone whose career depended on it disappearing. He paid for doing the right thing. And then he asked his fiancée to call me. I'm not going to pretend the trials were satisfying to watch. Justice in a courtroom is slow and procedural, and there are no dramatic moments, just days of testimony, objections, recesses, and lawyers arguing over financial documents that nobody in the gallery fully understands. Hooks got 12 years. Vargas is looking at federal RICO charges. Phelan took a plea for a reduced sentence and testified against Drummond, which was the piece Reeves needed most. Drummond's trial is still pending as of today. His lawyers are good and expensive, and they're using every mechanism available. But the evidence is the evidence. I sat through part of Drew's victim impact statement, which Claire read on behalf of their family, because she insisted on being the one to do it. She stood at that podium in a gray dress, and she read for 11 minutes without crying once, which was the bravest thing I've ever personally witnessed. And I've been in firefights. Afterward, standing in the courthouse hallway, she found me and put her hand on my arm. "He would have hated all of this," she said. "The attention, yeah. He just wanted to get married on Saturday." Her voice broke a little on that last word, and then she put it back together. "He would have wanted you to stop looking so serious." I almost laughed. Almost. The foundation came after. Claire's idea. She called it the Mercer Foundation, after the street where Drew's school was located, because she said naming it after him would have embarrassed him. It started with a grant program for teachers who report safety concerns and face professional retaliation for doing so. The money came from the lawsuit settlement against the school district, which was substantial enough to make the district's lawyers very unhappy for a very long time. I helped with the setup, paperwork, structure, connecting with attorneys who specialize in education law. I'm not on the board, that's not my role, but I show up when they need someone who can explain to a room full of administrators why ignoring a safety report is not just a policy failure, it's a liability that gets people killed. I tell them about Drew. I tell them about 23 shell casings on a church parking lot. I tell them that the system only works if the people inside it refuse to look the other way. 2 months after the last arrest, I was locking up my car in the lot after one of those meetings, when a young woman approached me. She was maybe 22, maybe less, wearing a Clarkstown High hoodie. She looked like she hadn't slept in a while. "You Drew Cole's brother?" she asked. "Yeah. I was in his class last year." "Government." She looked at the ground. He was the one who saw what was happening in the parking lot. "I know because I was the one who told him." I waited. "I've been scared," she said. I didn't testify. I was too scared. I thought after everything I should. I don't know. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I feel like if I'd come forward earlier, maybe, hey. I kept my voice quiet. You told a teacher. You did what you could. The rest of it, that's on every adult in that building who made the wrong choice after you told them. She looked up. "You're not responsible for what they did," I said. "You're responsible for what you do next." She nodded slowly, wiped her eyes, told me her name was Jessie and that she was thinking about going to law school. I told her Drew would have liked that. She walked away across the parking lot and I stood there watching until she reached her car. The way he used to watch his players walk to the bus after a game. 23 shots fired at a church parking lot in Clarkstown, Ohio. One man who refused to be bought. One system that tried to protect itself by destroying him. But here's the thing about systems that run on secrecy. They need everyone inside them to stay quiet, and all it takes is one teacher who files a report he's not supposed to file. One student who says something she's not supposed to say. One brother who starts counting shell casings when everyone else is looking at the body. 23 shots. And every single one of them is going to mean something. Before you go, I want to ask you something. When the senator looked into that camera and called it a politically motivated attack, did you feel rage, or did you feel a kind of tired recognition, like you've seen that move before? I want to know. Drop your city and state in the comments below, and tell me what you thought in that moment. I read every single one. And if Drew's story stayed with you, if it made you feel something you needed to feel, please take a second to hit like and subscribe. It helps more people find these stories, and these stories deserve to be found. Tell me in the comments what kind of story you want next. A wrongful conviction case where the wife discovers the truth 12 years too late. A special forces vet who comes home to find his business partner has been running something dark. Whatever you want, I'll write it. I'll be back soon. Take care of each other. I've thought a lot about the moment Drew decided to file that report. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't a soldier. He had no training for what happens when you put the wrong name in the wrong document and it lands on the wrong desk. He was a 28-year-old history teacher who saw something in a school parking lot and thought, this is what you're supposed to do. You tell someone. You write it down. You trust the system. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the senator, not Vargas, not the shell casings. I keep coming back to my brother standing at a copy machine in a school hallway, making a record of what he'd witnessed, believing the record would matter. The cruelest part of what happened to Drew isn't that bad. People has always existed. Bad people have always existed. The cruelest part is that the system he trusted was the system that fed him to them. Calloway got the report and buried it. Phelan made a phone call and went back to his desk. Drummond kept cashing checks and giving speeches about community safety. Every one of them made a small, quiet, individual choice to protect themselves. And every one of those choices stacked on top of the others until they formed a wall, and on the other side of that wall, my brother stood in a church parking lot and bled out on the asphalt 4 days before his wedding. That's how corruption actually works. It's not dramatic. It's not a villain in a room somewhere twirling a pen and ordering hits. It's a dozen ordinary people, each one just trying to stay comfortable, each one telling themselves their piece of it is small enough not to matter. And somewhere down the chain, someone pays the price for all of their small, comfortable choices at once. Drew paid it. What I've had to make peace with, and I won't pretend I'm fully there, is that Drew did everything right. He had the moral clarity to recognize something wrong. He had the integrity to report it even when someone tried to pay him to walk away. He didn't fold. He didn't negotiate. He didn't convince himself that staying quiet was the practical thing. Those aren't small qualities. Most people don't have all three of them at the same time. And Drew had them as a reflex, the way some people are naturally good at math or music, and it still got him killed. That's the thing nobody tells you about doing the right thing. It doesn't come with a guarantee. The arc doesn't always bend the way it's supposed to, at least not fast enough to matter to the person who needed it most. What I've had to accept is that the point of what Drew did wasn't the outcome. The outcome was taken from him. The point was the act itself, the decision, made without knowing what it would cost, to refuse to look the other way. That decision is what everything else came from. Jessie told him what she saw. Drew wrote it down. I started counting shell casings. Thomas pulled the records. Reeves built the case. Claire read 11 minutes of testimony without once losing her composure. None of it happens if my brother doesn't do what he did in that copy room. I think about that when I'm tired. When the foundation work is slow, or the legal process is grinding, or someone in a meeting tells me the system is complicated and change takes time. I think about Drew at a copy machine, filing a report nobody wanted him to file, because it was simply the right thing to do. That's the only inheritance he left me that I know what to do with.